All right, I think we're going to start now. First, before we go into it, I'd like to thank the Herb Kelleher Center for Entrepreneurship, Renewal, and Growth, and the TexTalks team for helping us put this together. Please visit us at www.textalks.info for additional talks such as this and additional info as well. And before we get into it, I just want to let everyone know that we have a drawing for just MBA students to win 2 South by Southwest tickets. The winners will be notified later by email or through text message, we don't know. So we have a very special guest today. We have Josh Dzaibiaks from The Zebra. So he is a 4-time entrepreneur who is the current co-founder, chief operating officer, and the chief marketing officer of The Zebra, which is an Austin-based insurance aggregator that counts Mark Cuban and Excel partners among its key investors. So what's very unique about him is that he started his first business when he was 14 years old and sold it for more than $1 million by the time he was 17. He has been recognized in Inc. magazine in the 30 Under 30 list, and most recently he was named in the prestigious Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Please, everybody, welcome Josh.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Am I on?
Absolutely. So we definitely should start at the beginning. Yeah. So please take us through your background. Where are you from?
So I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was born and raised on a 20-acre farm right outside the city, and moved to Austin about 5 years ago.
Oh, I see. I see. So you started a business at 14. I mean, that's an age most people are trying to fight acne and trying to figure out, what they're trying to do in their world, just going to school and surviving, and you're starting a business. So can you please just walk us through your first business, Media Catch?
Yes, I was also fighting acne, just to be clear. But no, I started by getting into web design at a really young age. So my parents bought the family a computer when I was like 13 years old, 14 years old. And I booted up for the first time and really just kind of become enthralled with this idea that you can connect with anybody around the world through the internet, share content, ideas, etc. So from a young age, I've been kind of hooked on this thing called the internet, and that led me into my first design project, which ultimately led me to my first business, and it's been kind of an internet journey since then. So
I see, I see. So what was your first business?
So Media Catch was a web design and web hosting company. Like I said, I started doing design. And what had happened was I was designing these websites for these local businesses, so just small businesses that, especially at the time, I mean, there was no other way for people to get online. Everybody wanted a website, but they didn't really know how to get one. So I started designing these websites for these local businesses, and they'd pay me $100, and I would design them a website, and then the next thing I knew, I would have another business coming at me asking me for more, and I'd charge $150 and then $200, and what I realized was that I'm only one person, I only have so much time in the day, I can only design so many websites, but at the same time, I'm taking all the hosting business and I'm giving it to somebody else, which is reoccurring revenue. And so I thought, man, I could figure out how to host these websites myself and charge the hosting fees. And so I kind of transformed Media Catch from design into web hosting. And that's what really took off. So I was, 15, 16 years old, hosting lots and lots of websites. And I would buy these computers. So back then, this was like cloud, Amazon Cloud. You're hosting everything on a proper computer, and you're having to log in remotely through a terminal and all this stuff. So I would host these websites that way, and then before I knew it, I would own I owned a bunch of servers. And I had a full-blown hosting company. I was hosting thousands of websites.
Wow.
And it became, at the time, there was a hosting magazine company, HostMag or something like that, and they named me one of the top 25 fastest-growing web hosting companies.
That's crazy.
So it transformed from a web design company into web hosting, and that's ultimately what became most successful for me, and I sold a couple years later.
I see, I see. So as a 14-year-old, you're thinking about recurring revenue.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it recurring revenue, but I was thinking about, I knew one thing, and that was I only had so much time in the day. So, and I did see reoccurring, revenue happening. So I figured I could latch onto that and make something interesting happening. I don't think I would know the term reoccurring revenue when I was 14. When I look back, I don't think I was that smart. So.
So where did you learn, where did you gain your business knowledge? You said you grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So where do you gain the business knowledge to, kind of build this business and scale it?
So my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and my father worked for my grandfather.
Okay.
And pretty much everybody in my family worked for my grandfather. It was a small business. It was a septic business, so they dealt with some pretty, interesting things. Not techie, put it that way. But all I kind of knew was entrepreneurship, because to me, I saw my parents and my grandparents, and for them to make a living, it was they created and did their own thing. Albeit it wasn't some big, venture or anything like that, but that's what was kind of inherent to me. It was almost organic and natural. So that was really kind of what I think inspired me to start my own thing.
Where did you kind of turn to, for mentors or even just educating yourself in an era where there's not really much you can turn to, especially as a 14-year-old, the internet's new, people still trying to figure that out. So how did you learn and, grow your business?
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up, like I said, I grew up on a 28-acre farm, so there really wasn't a feeling of, oh man, there's so much around me and so many resources or mentors or anything like that. But I did have the internet. It was a 56K modem, but I had it, and I knew I could connect online and I could find content out there that would help me. And so I just read a lot. I mean, it wasn't Google at the time, it was Yahoo, right? I would go to Yahoo and I'd be searching for how to do this, how to do that, what does this mean? And it was really, learning through trial and error and just sort of reading as much as I could.
I see, that's definitely very interesting. So one thing that we learn a lot in school is the difficulty of management. How, as a 14-year-old, especially as a teenager, do you manage employees? How do you gain their trust? How do you even bring people on? And how do you gain confidence of your employees that you know what you're doing?
Well, I don't know how much confidence I gave them. I mean, I gave them enough to, come to work and get a paycheck. But, I think it was just really about showing them promise through hard work. Right? I was super passionate, and still am. I don't do anything that I'm not very passionate about, and people pick up on passion, right? So I think that was a big part of it. It was awkward. I was actually, I had an office and 14 employees before I had my driver's license. And so there were lunch meetings and things where I'd have to, ask my employees to drive me to the meeting. There was those, awkward moments. And then there were things where, I'd have to sign a contract. And to be legally binding, you have to be a legal adult.
Right.
And so underneath a lot of my contracts, at least the ones where I knew somebody could audit or kind of dig in on, or if they knew that I was under 18, I would have another signature, which would ultimately be my parents.
Wow.
So I fought a lot of those battles just through persistence and passion and trying to show people that I was serious about what I was doing, and ultimately they bought the product because the product worked.
That's fantastic. What do your parents say when you ask them, like, I need you to co-sign with me these contracts?
My parents were always very supportive, still are. They were always a bit skeptical, though, at the same time, because they didn't really understand this whole internet thing. Again, this was kind of before it being so ubiquitous and talked about, and pre-Mark Zuckerberg and all the young billionaires. So they were a bit skeptical, but they were supportive. They saw the passion, and they saw me making a living, and they did what I asked them to do.
So then you sold your business, but how did that come about? And then how do you negotiate the sale of a business as a teenager as well?
Wow. So I...
Sorry, I'm giving you like 2 questions at once.
No, it's fine. So I had a CPA that, well, backing up a second, I had this web hosting company, and basically what would happen is, as I mentioned, this is like pre-cloud, pre-AWS, pre-cloud, like this is very manual to launch a server and to manage servers. So I'd be logging in remotely to sort of reboot a server, and I don't know if you guys remember like the T-Mobile Sidekick had a terminal on there, and I was constantly on that, just rebooting stuff.
Yes.
And, but it was very stressful because what would happen is a server would go down, or a whole rack of servers would go down, and my phone would blow up because all these businesses would be relying on their website being online, and the only thing they knew to do when their site was down would be to call my company.
Right.
So here I am, 16 years old, and I can't even go out to dinner because
Wow.
you know, a server goes down and my whole world blows up. So what started as passion and excitement and ultimately profit turned into a great deal of stress.
Right.
And I was sacrificing, you know, the social aspect of being a teenager and, you know, just all that it means to be young and try to have fun for this business. And so this great level of stress was constantly on my mind, and I was dealing with taxes at the time, and my CPA said to me, hey, you know, I think we're starting a business brokerage firm. I think I could sell your company for you. And I had never really thought about it at the time, but so my response to him was like, well, you know, go out, look at the market, tell me what you think you can get for it, and yeah, we'll see if it's interesting. And so he did that, showed me a number, and being 17, I was pretty excited about the number he showed me, and that company sold, money in bank, everything bound within, it was like 5 months.
Oh, wow.
So it just kind of happened. I think it was a combination of being really stressed out, and you know, I think it was good timing too. I think it happened for a reason. So
I see.
Yeah.
Something that I think we're all curious is, what was the first thing you bought as a 17-year-old kid? As a 17-year-old millionaire?
I bought a Mercedes C-Class off of eBay. And had it delivered to, so I moved, by the way, I moved out of my parents' house at 17. And I had it delivered right to my apartment.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
17. So, yeah. And funny story, I'd sold this business and, you know, had a little bit of money, and I went to an actual Mercedes dealership because I thought, oh, you know, I want a Mercedes. That's what all the celebrities have. So I want to look flashy, and yeah, that's what I want. So I went to a dealership, a Mercedes dealership, and they would not give me the time of day. They thought, who is this 17-year-old? They cannot afford a car here. And so that was my kind of middle finger to them, was to go home and buy it and pay for it in cash and have it delivered. So that's what I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you haven't graduated from high school.
No.
You taught yourself through CD-ROMs.
Yes.
So what is your perspective on education? It's kind of the irony of coming to the University of Texas.
That's a juicy question.
Yes.
I mean, education is extremely important.
Right.
For sure. No doubt about that. I put experience above everything.
Yes.
So, you know, if someone was to ask me, you know, what does one of my team members at the company, what did they go to school and what did they go to school for, I don't think I could answer that for anybody. But what I could tell you is maybe what they were doing before and what experience they brought to the table.
Right.
That just always resonates for me
Right.
when I'm hiring or building a team. But at the same time, education is critical, right? And there's different ways to educate yourself. I see some of the most successful people I know didn't leverage education through textbook. They had that piece, but they leveraged education through experience.
Right.
And it was really about involving themselves in, you know, internships or just early stage companies, or, you know, getting a job at any given company, at any given function, and just really absorbing. So to me, it's really about education through experiences.
I see. That's actually a pretty valuable point. That's very important. So moving on to your second business, could you walk us through what your second business was and how did it come about?
Yeah, so I sold this company, 17 years old, moved out of my parents' house, and I always had this fascination with the entertainment industry. I think it was just like the glitz and glam, right, what you'd see on TV, and I thought, oh, I'd love to be in the entertainment industry. And so my way into the entertainment industry was to buy my way into it. So I had some money and I said, okay, well, I'll invest in something involved in the entertainment industry. And it just so happened that I had met some guys that were starting a record label. And the concept for the record label at the time was to promote and distribute all their music through MySpace. I'm sure all of you guys remember MySpace. Rest in peace. But that was very much on the climb at the time. So, it was all about your top 10 friends, and everybody had a MySpace, and that was all the rage. So the thought was we were going to promote the music, promote the artists through social media channels. I don't know if that was a term at that point, but basically through MySpace, and distribute the music electronically. And that was going to be our competitive differentiator as a record label. Ultimately, that did not work. I don't know if it was timing, the people, whatever. I learned a lot of really valuable lessons. But what it did lead to for me was the advent of my next company, which was ShowClicks. Because what I saw was all the artists on our roster were going on tour from venue to venue, but they weren't the big venues, and yet at the same time they had a cult following, these artists, so we needed a way to sell tickets online. And so that led me to start a ticketing technology company, which became ShowClicks, and that ultimately grew pretty quickly for me.
That's fantastic. So you left ShowClicks in January 2013, and it was kind of the height of ShowClicks. You had over 100 million in revenue, 60 employees. What caused this decision, and how do you know if this decision was the right thing to do at that time?
Yeah, so the company had grown over the course of 7 years since I started to a point where it became less about innovation, in my role at least, less about innovation and exercising creativity, and more about financial engineering, corporate governance, board matters, things that, frankly for me, they just don't get me excited in the morning. So what I found was, even though we were having some of our biggest months or quarters ever in the company's history, I was going to work and I was feeling like work was work. And that is when I started to feel as though I wasn't supposed to be there anymore. I never want to work on something that actually makes me feel like it's work in the negative connotation of the word. And so that just started playing in my head more and more, and I noticed a pattern, and I noticed that in meetings I was starting to kind of back away. I wasn't as passionate, and the passion remained there with the other team members, but for me I was just starting to disconnect. So that's really, I think, what kind of led to me starting to think about new opportunities and what the next chapter might look like for me.
So you would prefer to start businesses rather than to run businesses and run larger organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I think above that even, what's most important to me is to stay connected to the creative part of it.
It's important. So moving on to the Zebra. So what is the Zebra, first of all, just to clarify?
Yeah, the Zebra is the nation's leading insurance search engine. So essentially, we help consumers find, buy, and manage insurance. Right now, we're exclusively focused on car insurance, but we'll be moving into other verticals soon.
I see. So how did you end up joining Adam at the Zebra, as the VP of product?
So as I mentioned, at this time, I was starting to kind of disconnect with my work. And truth be told, I had every reason not to leave. I had just bought a house in Pittsburgh. I just renovated it, moved in. I had my whole network there. I had this big successful business that was becoming profitable and over 100 million in sales. And I'm the type of person that, if you give me every reason not to do something, I'm probably going to do it, or at least really consider it. So anyway, I had sort of in the meantime, I had helped to start this incubator program in Pittsburgh, where we were giving $25,000 to several different ideas, like 4 or 6 times a year. And so I was pretty involved with this incubator program, and I would see and meet with a lot of the entrepreneurs and hear about the ideas. And so I would go to or watch via live stream the demo days. So after a few weeks, every entrepreneur would present what they worked on for the past few weeks and what they did with the money that we had given to them. And so this particular demo day, I was sort of at this place in my life, in my career, where I was starting to feel disconnected from my job, and I was watching all these presentations, and I heard Adam's presentation on the zebra, and it was the best presentation of the night, for me at least. And at the same time, I was really skeptical because I thought, well, surely this has been done before. So I started to kind of research the concept a little bit, just more out of curiosity than anything. And what I found was surprising to me. So that led to more and more conversations ultimately with Adam, and then kind of that was, the rest is history. We just kind of kept going from there.
So something that's really interesting about Adam is he once cold emailed Mark Cuban to raise funding from him, right? So that's pretty, he's a pretty bold person, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yes. So why did you guys bring the business to Austin? That's a move as well.
We raised the funds from Mark, who is in Dallas, and then our seed round of funding was from Silverton Partners, which is here in Austin. And they had brought us down here, I think it was during ACO, and kind of nudged us like, hey, you guys should consider maybe moving to Austin. And it was kind of a no-brainer for us because I think we were interested in getting away from the cold weather, and this is South, and the talent pool here is great, and lots of engineering talent, tech talent, etc. So it just kind of all worked out that way.
I see. So one of the things you've been recently recognized as is best places to work in Austin by the Austin Business Journal last year, and you're growing this company at a crazy rate. So how do you make sure you create this great culture and that it stays a great culture as you grow your company?
Well, I'm a believer that the culture is really derived from the core 10 or 15 people that you first hire. I feel like it's those early folks that really set the tone, and then to your point, it really is about management moving forward and being picky, right? So they set the tone, they set the standards, they set the bar, and then everybody you hire at that point, you should sort of connect the dots. Does this make sense according to what we've already built, the energy, the camaraderie that we have going on today? And you need to make that a priority in your hiring, right? And your firing. So one of the things we did is we looked at that core 10 or 15 folks that we first brought onto the team, and we identified the unique attributes of those folks, and we said, well, what makes them extra special? Why do we really like them? Why do we really want more of that? And we wrote that down, and those became our core values. And so, from that point on, we hire and we fire based on those core values. So when we're interviewing somebody, we think about those core values, and if somebody does something that goes against those core values, we will let them go, and we will tell them that we're letting you go because this is a core value to us, and clearly this is not a sync for you. And so I think it's just about being really true to that and persistent.
I see. How involved are you in the hiring process right now?
Depends on the function. We're hiring across the board for anybody interested. Product, marketing. So for myself, I tend to be more involved on the marketing side, the commercialization side of things. We are hiring a lot in product, which is something I'm very close to. So I stay close to those hires as well.
I see. So one of the things we've noticed about the Zebra is you have a lot of partnerships with major organizations, especially as a startup. How did you form those partnerships, and how do you maintain those partnerships as a smaller startup that's still trying to figure out your way in this world, I guess?
Yeah, we are still trying to figure out our way in this world. Well, are you referring to like the carriers, like the MetLifes of the world?
Yes.
Yeah. So we partner with a large number of very big companies. A lot of companies that were born in sort of the horse and buggy era. So it's not always the easiest thing to get them to adopt new technology. I think it's not easy, and you have to be extremely patient. But you have to understand, like, what's the music to their ears, like what resonates to them, and you have to really also understand their pain points. So for us, what we realized is that these companies were born in the horse and buggy era, and they're trying to find ways to connect with the modern day consumer. And that is, sort of enter the zebra, right? Like that's what we're doing, and that is ultimately the type of consumer that we're trying to attract and we're building products for. So that was our positioning for these big companies. It's like, okay, you have this need and we have this solution, and here's what that can mean to your business. And it didn't happen overnight, and we still have we have some contracts that we started conversations in 1 year, and it took like 1.5 years to 2 years before it ever came to life. It was about kind of just being persistent and also proving yourself through other means too. I think if they start to see you gain traction, or you start to win other companies like them, then they're more likely to kind of bend and give you a try.
I see. Then kind of switching to more of the technology side, could you talk to us about the AI and the machine learning behind the Zebra and how that really helps your company and how that has really helped your business grow?
Yeah. AI. First of all, I think a lot of people call things that are AI, to me, just that are basic programming, like if this, then that. So AI to me is kind of a kitschy term that people translate differently. For the Zebra, I mean, we use a lot of data to inform customers on, help them basically make a better or smarter decision. So whether that's around their insurance coverage or why things are priced a certain way or what they can do to impact their price or impact the premiums that they're paying. That's probably one of the biggest ways that we're using artificial intelligence today. I think moving forward, we're going to continue to build out tools and functionality and using data to kind of help educate consumers. We're in a space that is not that sexy to most people, insurance. And it's also a space that rubs people the wrong way in a lot of ways. It gives them the heebie-jeebies. So I think it's our job to kind of educate the consumer on insurance in a way that is fun and engaging and intuitive. And I think those are the best ways that we can kind of try to use AI in today's world.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask those questions. They're kind of hot topics right now with a lot of Amazon and Google coming on strong. Yes. So in September, though, last year, you basically brought in a former kayak executive to become your CEO. So similar to your question that I asked to you about ShowClicks, how do you know it's the right time to step away and let someone else come in and run the company as well?
Well, and it's not dissimilar to my answer for ShowClicks. I think that you really start to evaluate where your strengths lie and where they don't, and you line that up with where the business is at the time and the needs that it has for growth. So I think for us it was really just about looking toward the future and thinking about, okay, well, we want to be a mainstream consumer brand. That's always been our vision from day one. And thinking about, is this the right team makeup? What do we need around the table? What are we bringing to the table, but where are the gaps at, right? And so when and by the way, when we started the company, everybody would refer to us as the kayak for insurance. So there was like this natural feeling of, well, if we want, you know, a new CEO or new leadership, like let's look to see, you know, who's available at kayak. And that's kind of how that went down.
You said you evaluated what you need, but how do you evaluate even yourselves? As, oh, you know, we need to step away and we need to bring someone in as the CEO.
Yeah.
That has to be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, you do have to be, you have to be humble enough to kind of recognize where your weaknesses are. And maybe they're not weaknesses, but maybe they're just areas where you'd like to see, where somebody else may have a stronger set of experience, or bring something different to the table. And sometimes it's also just about a new perspective. You know, for us, we started this company and built it up until, you know, this last raise when we brought on Keith as CEO, that we were in it for over 5 years. So you start to become saturated, and your viewpoint maybe isn't always the right viewpoint, and it could help to have somebody else coming in from a different perspective, from a different level, with a different type of experience to add to the, you know, to the team.
That's a great answer. So what do you see, so you have quite a different array of business experience going from B2B and B2C. So what do you see as the main difference between, you know, creating a B2B business versus a B2C business?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think that was something that was really interesting to me, to be fair. I mean, when I was sort of thinking, when work was starting to become work for me at ShowClicks, I was starting to think about, you know, what do I want to do next? What's on my bucket list, if you will? And consumer was at the top of that. I had only done B2B software sales up to that point. And so that was actually one of the things that really intrigued me about this opportunity, was I saw a mass consumer opportunity. And I didn't know very much about consumer. I'd actually say I didn't know really much at all about consumer. So to me, it was an interesting challenge. I'm somebody who really gets off on marketing and product, and so what better way to do that but in a consumer-facing world? I have seen a lot of differences. First off, consumer-facing businesses are highly iterative. So, you know, in a B2B world, it's often driven by how many boots you have on the ground selling the product, so it's sales-driven. Whereas in a B2C world, there's certainly a sales component, and oftentimes that's very important as well, but it can be much more marketing heavy, right? So how wide can you cast your net, how far, how fast, and how smart can you get about that? And that's a very iterative process. So, you know, at Dzaibiaks, we're extremely data-driven, to the point where it can be nauseating at times. We have so much data at our fingertips, but we're using that to inform our buying decisions, from media down to how our funnel looks, the way we convert people, et cetera. Whereas I think, again, on the B2B side, it is about that sales force. It's about, you know, hiring boots on the ground out there. It's a lot of times it's much more relationship driven. You can only scale by how big of a sales force you have. Marketing and all that always plays an important role in every function, every business, and there's a lot of overlap. But I'd say that highly iterative, highly data-driven, maybe even a faster cadence when it comes to what you're trying and at what pace in terms of what you can do to move the needle from a marketing perspective. Those are kind of the big things that resonate with me when I think about the big differences between the two, B2B and B2C.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So across your different experiences with your different startups, you've also raised capital in different areas of the country. Could you tell us a little bit about the differences between raising capital, you know, on the East Coast versus the West Coast, or even in Austin?
Yeah, so my first business was bootstrap. I just grew it organically. I started with whatever design money I made, $150 or whatever. My second business, ShowClicks, was venture capital funded through a group. Essentially, it was super angels, really, on the East Coast. Smaller funds. We only raised about $6 or $7 million for the lifetime of the business. And then the Zebra, we've raised over $60 million, and we're only on Series B. And we have some big picture thinkers around the table, Excel Ventures and Mark Cuban. I'd say that, you know, you start to think about how you grow the business differently, for sure, right? Like when you're growing a business bootstrap, you don't have the resources to take as many risks as maybe you do if you're growing something like, you know, the Zebra, where you have a lot of these resources at your fingertips. So you're much more sensitive to, you know, the next step you take, because it could make or break you, right? Because it's like you don't necessarily have the resources to fail as much as you might on when you have venture capital around the table. I'd say that the biggest difference I noticed in between you know, the ShowClicks and the Zebra in terms of style of VCs is you find that there's certain VCs. Every VC has a thesis, by the way. They're all looking, you know, for some sort of exit within some sort of time frame under some sort of thesis. And one of my biggest learning lessons from ShowClicks is I did not really understand that, and I certainly didn't understand that about the people I had around the table. So the whole time I'm growing this company, I didn't really understand what my investors really wanted from it. And that may not sound important, but it actually really is, because at the board level, you start to hear conversation, you start to have conversation, you start to make decisions, and these things might not add up to you unless you really know what their, you know, gold star is, North Star, I should say, what their North Star is. So at times I'd often be confused, right? Because the investors I had there were looking for a far different outcome than what I had in my mind. And so I'm building a business and making decisions based on what I have in my mind, but their vision for that was a little bit different, because their outcome and their North Star was a little different than mine. So I think, you know, getting that alignment is really important. Whereas at the Zebra, you know, we have, as I mentioned, big picture thinkers. Right? So they're looking to hit a home run. They're looking to build this big brand, and therefore we make decisions that support that. And fortunately, we have the resources to support that as well. So you just notice differences in the way that they guide you, because they're looking for different outcomes. And so I think it's important that you're, you know, whoever you put around the table, if you take money in, if you take venture capital in, that you really understand what they're looking for out of this. Are they looking for a 5-year exit and 3-time multiple? Or are they looking for, you know, a 10, 15-year exit and 100 or 200x multiple? You know? So those are, you run the business completely different ways based on the exit scenario that you're gunning for.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the other aspects that I thought was interesting talking to you last week was you talked about the emotional aspect of being an entrepreneur. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, without crying? I'm kidding.
It's okay if you cry. It's okay.
No, I think that it's interesting because all I know is being an entrepreneur. And all a lot of people see are the accolades. They see, you know, the feature in a newspaper article, or they see the team and they think revenue and they think money, they think success, and that's, you know, there's definitely that part of it. But what they don't see and what they don't hear about is, you know, the emotional toll that entrepreneurship can take on you. And it's not just entrepreneurship. I think it's leadership in general, where the buck stops with you, right? You have this idea, it doesn't have to be a business, and you're so passionate about it that it starts to eat at you, right? Like every morning it's the first thing on your mind, and it's the last thing on your mind before you go to bed at night. And then what ends up happening is when things go right, you're on this like super high emotional, you know, euphoria, and then when things go wrong, you're on the complete opposite end of that. I think over time, if you don't pay attention to that actually happening, you start to feel like you're in a really lonely place because nobody around you understands that, and you're the only person that is, you feel like you're the only person that is as passionate about whatever it is that you're doing that exists. And so you start to feel lonely. And I think the emotional piece is something that, you know, people don't talk about because it's kind of, you know, it's taboo. It's like, well, you know, let's inspire people to start a company, and I think that's good. I'm all about entrepreneurship, obviously, but I do think that there really is an emotional piece to it. There is a psychological piece to it that needs to be talked about more.
So how do you cope with the loneliness and the stress of being an entrepreneur?
It is about talking about it. I mean, I think it's about recognizing that, man, like, I can't stop thinking about this idea to the point where, like, you know, it's eating me. It's eating me alive. I don't really have a social life, or when I do, I can't connect with people because all I can think about or all I can talk about is this business or this idea or whatever it is. So it's recognizing that exists, that there is a real issue there. And then I'd say that, you know, you should surround yourself with a diverse group of people. There's a